Everybody, welcome to the Move Plus. This week we are breaking down the biggest transfers so far in the cycling offseason. We have Nairo Quintana going to Movistar from unemployment, not racing last year. Primož Roglic going from Jumbo to Bora, and Tao Geoghegan Hart going from Ineos to Little Trek. And we'll discuss how that affects their teams that both are going to and that they're leaving. But first, let's hear from our sponsors.
Hope you're enjoying this edition of the Move Plus. I'm just going to jump in here for a second and tell you about one of our partners that we're just so grateful for, because we all use the product. We got introduced to OneSkin about a year ago. Here's those of you watching on YouTube, here's their daily topical that I use. And it's really a remarkable product. They basically have identified a peptide by testing thousands of them that just increases the appearance and firmness of your skin. As simple as that. It actually, you can read more about it online to get very detailed and scientific, but basically it also, it reduces and eliminates what they call zombie cells. Those are dead cells in your skin. And that's why it can create more collagen and more new firmness. So this is a daily thing for me, especially when I have allergies and things like that. I wake up, I have this puffiness in my eyes. Then I bust out this product right here, their OS1 eye supplement. I put this under my eyes right here, and it helps with some of that puffiness and bagginess when I'm having bad allergies. Really remarkable product. In fact, they just sent me this cool travel kit with their whole line of products. I'm started using all of them. Wish I had started using them sooner. That's my only regret. Get 15% off with the code THEMOVE at oneskin.co. All right. ONESKIN.co, not .com, .co. 15% off on your purchase from The Move.
So Johan, the biggest riders we talked about changing teams this offseason, or I guess re-entering the World Tour after a season of rest and recovery, in Quintana's case, are Tao Geoghegan Hart going from Ineos to Little Trek, Primož Roglic going from Jumbo-Visma to Bora, Hansgrohe, and Nairo Quintana going from unemployment to Movistar. What's your let's start with Quintana. To me, this is the juiciest one. I frankly didn't see this coming at all. He went from, I don't want to get too deep into the case of what happened, but he tested positive for a lightly banned painkiller at the Tramadol at the 2022 Tour de France. He lost that result, pretty good result, 6th place, I believe, but he's not banned, technically. There were questions about how could this happen? It actually doesn't look that good, because if you know that it's banned and you know you're getting tested, why would you take it? That's a little strange. I think that's an unanswered question a lot of people had. He sits out a year. I frankly didn't see him coming back. He comes back out of nowhere, signed by Movistar. Why is this happening? And I'd be curious, how do you think he fits into the team? And what do you think he's getting paid? Do you think they got a good deal on this?
Yeah, well, I think, obviously he got banned from the Tour for Tramadol. As of today, Tramadol is one of these special rules for cycling, right? Tramadol is not on the banned list of WADA. The UCI has banned it because it's a painkiller, and supposedly it makes your reflexes slower, and it could be dangerous on a bike, which makes sense. So it's not allowed in competition. It was allowed out of competition. It's going to be on the banned list next year. So all sports will be treated the same way, but cycling had a special rule for Tramadol. I don't understand either, because it's absolutely not performance enhancing. So on the contrary, it would make you go slower. Unless you have a big injury and a lot of pain, but then, if it's banned, I think there's other painkillers that are allowed. And especially, in the Tour where you're going to get tested for sure. So that's a bit of a mystery. 2023, no team. He's been trying. He did compete, however, at the beginning of the year in the national championships in Colombia individually. He got third, I think, third position. But yeah, here for me, it's clear that this is definitely a decision that's been made on a higher level than the team Movistar. I think it's a corporate decision. Movistar Telefónica is a global company and with huge interest in Latin America. And Nairo Quintana in Colombia he has a godlike status. He is incredibly popular. It's crazy if you see, when these guys go training, there's pelotons behind them, cyclists and cars. It's unbelievable to see. So he's incredibly popular, and I think that Telefonica company, the sponsor, had a big say in rehiring Nairo Quintana for Team Movistar. Personally, I don't dislike it, man. They have Enric Mas as their leader for the Grand Tours. But Enric Mas, with all due respect, he has his limits. In the Tour, what could you expect from Enric Mas? Fourth, maybe. Let's not forget Quintana was sixth in 2021 or 2022, and he was not in great shape. I think he remains one of the best climbers. Let's not forget ex-Tour of Italy winner, ex-Tour of Spain winner. And for sure, extremely motivated. And from what I've been hearing from inside the peloton is that during the whole year, basically because Quintana lives in Andorra during the season. And he's been training there a lot, even if he wasn't racing in Europe. And apparently he was flying. He was hurting everybody on training rides and climbs. So I have no doubt he's going to be back on his level. Nothing has been said yet if Quintana will go to the Tour. I think personally, Quintana, if I would be the team direction there, I would focus Fit Quintana on the Giro, and then later on the season on the Vuelta, and leave the Tour for Enric Mas. I think that would make sense.
Yeah, I like that in theory, and I am of two minds about this. As you say, it's a pretty good pickup. Let's say they got a deal. I can't imagine the price was crazy for a rider that wasn't on another team. It was like, hey, do you want to sit at home for another year? Or do you want to race for us? I assume they got some decent deal on him.
Yeah, for sure.
Problem I have with this, and splitting them up, I think would be the right decision. But in Enric Mas, good rider, but age 28, and he got fifth of the 2020 Tour, sixth at the 2021 Tour. So you'd say about the same as Quintana around that same time period. He's had a few impressive second places at the Vuelta. I came away from this last Vuelta though thinking, like, is that as good as we're ever going to see Enric Mas? He was good. He wasn't bad really. He just kind of looked outclassed when other riders were going really, really hard, when the best riders in the world were all racing at close to their top speed. It just seemed like he's not good enough to compete. And I just had a feeling of like, this might be it. I think we've seen peak Mas, and we're going to see, like, if he wasn't Spanish and Movistar didn't exist, is he Wilco Kelderman? That might be a crazy thing to say, but does he just have to go to Jumbo and be a domestic?
You have a point. I mean, Enric Mas has been and is criticized a lot in Spain, by the Spanish press because, he follows, he never attacks. But hey, he can't do any better. I mean, he's
I love that.
The thing is, he is a very good rider, Spencer. He's a very good rider. I mean, he was 2 times second in the Vuelta. 2 times or 3 times. I don't remember now. Anyways,
I think it's 2 times.
Yeah.
3 times. Sorry. I forgot about 2018.
Top 5 in the Tour. It's not given to everybody. There's not that many riders who can say that, they have 4 top 5 places in Grand Tours. But I think that's his limit. He's a great rider, but he's not somebody who can say, hey, we're going to put the whole team around him and he is going to be on the podium. We don't know which step, but he's going to be on the podium. That's not Enric Mas. So in that aspect, I think that the addition of Quintana for Movistar is great, sports-wise. But above all, I repeat, for Movistar and the brand Telefonica, this is a huge move. Latin America, I mean, I do remember when there was this, let's not forget, Quintana has his history with Movistar, and he left kind of I'm not going to say on bad terms, but there was not a good understanding between him and Enric Mas, and especially not between him and Valverde. And I do know from people that have told me from Colombia, for example, that the company Telefónica, Movistar, has suffered tremendously when Movistar basically chose the side of the Spanish guys and let Quintana go. So now he's back. So great, everybody happy.
Yeah, I understand it from a business perspective, and it makes a lot of sense. And as we said, Enric Mas, good, not great. You don't not bring Quintana in because you want to protect Enric Mas's place in the team. Like, it feels like they can both coexist.
Yeah.
My big problem, and I love the criticism of Enric Mas, where it's like, he doesn't attack. Well, it's like, well, he can't. He's going as fast as he possibly can. What do you want him to do? But so just acknowledging that I see why they're doing it, and I see why it could be good. You know, they could get fifth at the Tour with Nairo in theory. Do we even have a lot of good examples of riders sitting out a year at that age and coming back? In theory, you could say, well, maybe it helps them because they're rested, but I don't know. I feel like once you start sitting out at that age, it is hard to get back in. I guess you have history with this with Mr. Armstrong.
That's the big question in today's cycling. 1 year is huge.
Yeah,
because the level keeps going up bit by bit, 0.5%, 1% every year. The only thing that I know is that he's been training with all these guys in Andorra, and it's full of professional cyclists. There are a lot of really good riders live in Andorra, and they all say he is flying. So I'm personally not too worried about Quintana's form and that he will be back at the same level. Now, the question is the best level of Quintana good enough in next year's cycling to be in the front?
I guess that depends what race we're talking about. If we're talking about Volta Valenciana, I think he could win it. So, and I don't think they should scoff at that. I mean, Movistar is not in a position to like scoff at any wins that could come their way. But my big problem with it is, so Nairo's 33, second oldest guy on the team. Time and energy will go into him as a leader. Every race he's at, he will be a leader. He's a proud guy. I don't think he's really ever been a domestique. Mm-hmm. And you look at their roster and you look at younger riders and you say, who are they not going after young GC talents like they should? I mean, I looked at their roster and the riders below 25. You don't see a lot of emerging stars, you would say. You have Ora Lascano. I don't know if that's how you say his name. Really good rider, but it just seems like there's a lot of young talents out there. And is Movistar kind of stuck at a certain generation and not focusing enough on those?
Yeah, I think at this point, Movistar is not the sexy team anymore that everybody wants to go to. There's other options. There's Jumbo. There's Alpecin. Name them. Bora. Of course, UAE. But all these talents, obviously, they know and they see. And I think we have the example, for example, of Matteo Jorgensen, who is leaving Movistar specifically for that reason, because he thinks that if he stayed at Movistar, where he had actually the opportunity to be one of the leaders, he left to Jumbo-Visma because he thinks that they're running behind at Movistar. So
yeah, he's going from a worse or a better racing situation to a worse racing situation just to go to Jumbo. That feels bad for Movistar.
Yeah, no, I think that's and it's a bit logical. Listen, I mean, the top management, they've been around for more than 40 years, Spencer. Hey, Eusebio, it's been it's been a nice run. Come on, move on,
I have a lot of respect for, obviously a lot of respect for him. It's amazing what he's done, but
yeah, it is. But, time goes fast, and there's, they're trying to keep up, but I don't think the mentality at the top is open enough to be at the same level as some other teams who are more advanced in terms of science and technology.
There's a great scene in the documentary about them on Netflix where one of their directors is like, we got to make the race hard for the final climb. And Pachi Vila, who I don't know if he's working with the team anymore, but he really smart guy, was like, no, absolutely not, because we're not as strong as the other riders. So if we make the race hard, we will get dropped. We shouldn't do that. And it was if they had never thought of this before. This was like new news to them. So that made me wonder about
he's leaving. Pachi Vila's leaving, by the way. He's going back to Bora.
Which is that's not a good sign. That guy is very sharp, and I think he was like a much needed breath of fresh air in the team. The fact he's going to Bora is good for Bora, bad for Movistar. Should we move on to Tao Geoghegan Hart from Ineos to Little Trek? Kind of, I would say the quietest of these moves. I don't know if people really think about Tao as like a superstar GC rider, but you said this in our text conversation. 3 Grand Tour winners change teams, and Tao is one of them. There are 3 former Grand Tour winners, won the 2020 Giro d'Italia. I thought he looked like he could have won this year's before he crashed out with a broken hip. I listened to him kind of talk about his recovery on the cycling podcast with Daniel Friebe, and it sounded kind of intense, but let's just assume he's back to full strength. He will be back to full strength in 2024. We're operating under that assumption. What do you think of this move, and why do you think it's happening? This was one of the weirder ones to me, why he would leave Ineos and why Ineos wouldn't try to keep him.
Yeah, obviously, I think as you say, he was on great form this year. From the beginning of the season, I saw, if I remember correctly, the Tour of Valencia. He was already very strong. I think he won a stage there, but he was super strong. And in the Giro, he was strong until he crashed. He was the only one, I think, who could follow. Who could follow Primož Roglic together with and then afterwards, then Geraint Thomas came back the day that Evenepoel got dropped on it. So this was in the beginning of the Giro. Then unfortunately he has that crash, and a crash like that, an injury like this is, it's a risk. It all depends. We all know back in the days what happened to Belocchi. It ended his career. Chris Froome. Look what happened to Chris Froome after his crash. I don't know. It's probably not the same, but still, it is a very important injury. And if that's the reason why Ineos was, so easy to let him go, or I don't know if at the moment that Tao got the offer, what there was going on within Ineos. Now finally we see also that there's been a lot happening in Ineos internally. With Rod Ellingworth. That's maybe one of the transfers of the season, him leaving Ineos. But he goes to a team that for sure really believes in him. Signed a long-term deal, which is is important. To Little Trek. Little Trek, obviously, it's clear that their budget has increased, significantly with all the signings they've done. And I think it's a good move. I think it's a good move for Tao. He's going to be the sole leader for GC, which at Ineos was never going to be the case. And it's going to depend on how he recovers. He's going to need some time, but if everything heals properly, there's no reason why he couldn't be back at his level.
Yeah, I think I wrote between 2020, it was maybe 2021, 2022, that Tao Geoghegan Hart should leave and go to Trek Segafredo, which is what they were at the time.
Oh, really? Oh,
and then so now I'm like, I'm fully supportive of this. I thought this should have happened for years. Perfect marriage. Little Trek needs a GC leader. I think maybe a mistake to go after. Didn't they sound like Vincenzo? They just kept signing guys at the end. It'd be like Alberto Contador, Vincenzo Nibali. I think they learned from their lesson. I mean, Tao's only 28. Let's say Ineos didn't pursue him because of the injury. I like the risk. Let's say he doesn't recover. It's like, well, it's a risk you had to take. If you're Little Trek, you're never going to get the top guy. Tao Geoghegan Hart is kind of like I'm trying to say this kindly, like a budget version of a really, really top GC rider. I think when he's fit and healthy, he can compete with the best guys. You look at his power numbers from the Giro in 2020. I guess technically it wasn't a full 3-week stage race, but he was putting out serious watts per kilos, like as good as anybody in the sport. Yeah. So I love this for Little Trek. I think this is what they've needed for a long time. I don't totally understand. I know. So Ineos was going to lose Carlos Rodriguez. They bring him back. They do what they have to do financially to get him back.
They paid €1 million to Eusebio. So he's, Eusebio is there for a reason.
Who then turned around and gave that to Nairo. But I don't totally understand. Maybe he just didn't want to come back. But it seems like homegrown talent like this, and just to let him go. And what you say about being a clear leader at Little Trek, that's I feel like a huge problem with Ineos recently. Like I remember watching a late season race. It was like Luke Plapp, Magnus Sheffield, Ethan Hayter. It kind of felt like it's not like they're all sprinting against each other. It's like everyone thinks that they're a domestique for the other person, but the other person also thinks they're a domestique for that person. Mm-hmm. And you kind of get this jumble of, they don't ever really name like, this guy is our leader, we will ride for him. And which then gives that person confidence and allows them to make decisions in the race, knowing that they're the leader. It just was like a flat structure. Like if you want to be the leader, you have to prove it. You even saw this back with like the Froome-Wiggins mess in, 2012, where you'd Froome dropping Wiggins, and it worked for a long time. I think just the excellence of Wiggins and Froome, Geraint Thomas, Bernal kind of papered in, but even the Bernal Tour win, if you go back, there was weird stuff with Geraint Thomas that year that I thought almost jeopardized their win. The fact that they never would just like pound on the table and say, this is our leader. I know you did this as a team manager at the Vuelta, where you had Levi Leipheimer and Contador, and you just said, sorry, this is our leader. This is who we're going with. And it gives that person the role. And the fact that he didn't have that at Ineos, I think, is probably one of the main reasons he's leaving to go to Little Trek.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also, I mean, I repeat, the budget at Little Trek is they have room for good contracts. I mean, they signed Tao Geoghegan Hart, but they also signed, for example, I think they signed 10 or 11 new guys. But Jonathan Milan, that's a big sign, also a big signing, and Andrea Bajoli, two guys who can win races. And this is what I like about Tao. He is a Grand Tour winner, but he's also capable of. He's a winner. He can win. He can win races. He knows how to sprint in small groups and is smart in finals of races. So I think they need that guy at Little Trek.
Hey, I'm just going to take a second here and tell you about our partners at HVMN who've created Ketone IQ. It really is amazing. I think it was back in 2019. We were going on the show and explaining to people what ketones were and how the Peloton was using it. What is it? What have we uncovered here? And now, if I mention ketones to someone personally, they're like, oh yeah, of course, they know about it. It's becoming a part of everyone's daily routine, part of their physical being, part of their fitness, everything. Now, personally, I like to use it as a daily supplement for mental clarity and focus. I've definitely noticed a difference with that. Got the rest of the family trying it now every day. And once it becomes part of your daily routine, it's a thing. You can get 30% off. Just get a regular subscription to Ketone IQs. Just get them delivered on a regular basis. You don't even think about it. Throw some in the cabinet. Throw some in your fridge. The travel ones. Now, this is the big one. Those of you watching on YouTube, this is the big one that I use daily to keep in the fridge. That's 10 different doses, basically. And then you have the little travel packs that are just great. I throw one of those in my bag anytime I go anywhere. But again, 30% off. Get the regular subscription. Give it 3 to 6 months. Just try it. And I guarantee you'll notice a difference in your physical well-being and your mental alertness. 30% off. Go to hvmn.com/themove. Again, visit hvmn.com/themove and subscribe upon checkout for 30% off.
Yeah, Little Trek. I think we're doing like a more in-depth transfer show next week. So we'll kind of get into, I think they've had a really good offseason, one of the best ones in the sport. Ineos, one of the worst ones. Like if you just measure their pro cycling stats points in versus out, this is the second year Ineos has had the biggest outflow of PCS points, and losing Rod Ellingworth doesn't seem like that's a great situation inside the team. But we can get into that in more depth next week. And before we go on with our love letter to Tao Geoghegan Hart, let's go to Primož Roglic, who's going from Jumbo to Bora. On the surface, you look at this and you say, you could say a couple things. Say, wow, that's a big loss for Jumbo. I think he was their longest tenured rider. No, I guess Robert Hessink would be their longest tenured rider, but one of the main guys of the new team, most frequent winner, I believe. And
yeah, for sure. I mean,
strong guy who can still win races.
I think Primož Roglic is solely responsible to put Jumbo where they are, coming from back in the days Lotto Jumbo, and they were like at the bottom of the first division.
Like Lotto NL, remember those years?
Lotto NL, yeah. So I mean, that was a surprise move, a bit of a consequence of all the, we talked about before about the potential merger. In the midst of all that happened. So I'm not saying it's a consequence of that, because I personally think that, and from what I've been reading, is that Primož, especially after the Vuelta, where he was kind of told to, not attack anymore on the third last stage, I think, he felt like he needed to move on. I think it's logical also for a guy like him, if he still wants to have a shot at the Tour de France, he needed to leave, because, Jumbo Visma or Visma lease a bike next year. They're all in for Jonas, of course, and rightfully so. So, and I think there Plugge did a really smart move, I think that's the transfer of the year on all sides. First of all, for Primož himself, rumored amount is 6 million euros a year, which is huge. 3-year deal. And a 1 million, a 3 million euro buyout. So if you look at, I've heard that Primož was making 4 million at Jumbo. So for next year, that's a 7 million benefit operation for Plugge.
That's not bad.
That's a nice co-sponsor without having to advertise it, without having to give away the real estate on the jersey. So smart move. Primož is he's in the fall of his career, let's say. He's still able to win really nice races, but they had to make a choice there. And I think it's logical that they bet everything on Jonas and on Sepp Kuss and on Wout van Aert and on some new guys who are coming from their development team. But yeah, I mean, Primož to Bora, that's interesting. Bora is not to be underestimated. They're doing really a good job, and they're working really well. They also hired Dani Martinez from Ineos, strong addition also. So if that combination works with Primož and Dani Martinez, that could be a very dangerous duo.
Yeah, that actually, there was like a point in time, maybe I had lost my mind, where I was trying to argue Dani Martinez was the strongest rider at Ineos, but that's another rider that I'm surprised that they just let go. Like that guy is really good. I feel like much better than his results at Ineos say he is. The huge addition for Bora. Bora has kind of suffered with this, and there's one way you could look at this and say you're going to pay a 34-year-old rider 6 million euros a year, and you're going to pay a 3 million euro buyout deal. Like that seems a little risky, but I think what they've deduced is like they have Vlasov got 7th at the Vuelta, Kijn Udebrooks, some weird stuff going on there. We should talk about that. 8th at the Vuelta, could be great in the future, probably not there yet. And then like Emmanuel Buchmann, you have a lot of good but not great riders, and then you can just kind of plug in, Vlasov. You can just plug in Primož, and boom, you have a potential Tour de France contending team right there. I guess if he goes on to win the Tour, Jumbo looks a little silly, but in my opinion, you're committed to Jonas at this point. You kind of had to move on from Primož. I like this for both, for Jumbo, for Bora, and the fans. Like this is fun that we get to watch Primož race against his old team. I think this is better for the sport because you don't have Primož and Jonas kind of working for each other. We get to see a better race because of this.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And it also shows the still ambition of Primož Roglic. He could have easily said, "Hey, listen, I'm staying here. I'm paid very, very well, like royally paid. I can stay here for another 2 or 3 years. The big star is somebody else. Whatever I do is fine,
Yeah.
He absolutely wants to win that Tour de France. He won the Vuelta, he won the Giro. It's the only one left. So it's now or never for Primož.
And they're paying you €4 million a year, theoretically, at Visma, Lisa Bike, or whatever it's going to be called, to specifically not contest the wins. Like, that's nice. That's a nice life. It says a lot about him that he turned that down. But I think Bora is in a really interesting position. I had never heard this before. George Hincapie said this on a Move podcast, that they paid for Primož by, like, they were not spending their entire budget the last few years to save up money to sign a big star. Had you heard this before, Johan?
I've heard some rumors about that. Yeah, that they were building a reserve into the budget over the years to make a big signing. Let's not forget also, Spencer. Let's not forget the factor Specialized. Specialized is a huge factor also here. Yeah. And we know how they go after riders specifically, individually. So the 6 million of Primož will not entirely come out of the Bora budget. Out of the team budget.
I mean, Specialized is deduced that star riders sell bikes, that they're a very star-driven brand. They sell very expensive bikes, so they better be winners and worth it. They're not owned by a big conglomerate. Like, I guess you could debate that. I think Merida has a large stake in them. But let's get it before we go. Udo Brooks, like the young GC star on Bora, very young. I think he was 20 years old this year. Is he? I've heard rumors that he's maybe leaving the team before the start of the next season. That seems unlikely since we're now closing in on the start of the season.
He was. First of all, he's done an amazing for a 20-year-old. He's done an amazing season. Several top 10s in big World Tour stage races and 8 in the Vuelta. I think he has a big future. Now, how far he can get, that's different. That's a different game. But we've all seen his comments during the Vuelta that he was really unhappy with the collaboration with Vlasov. Vlasov was kind of, I mean, in Uiterbroek's words, he was kind of racing against Uiterbroeks, or he was racing to be the first Bora. Which,
yeah. I think that's true, like objectively true if you go back and watch the race.
Yeah, and of course now with the addition of Primož, it's Uiterbroeks is a young talent, very ambitious. So bringing Primož in is kind of putting him, already if he's one step below Vlasov, now he's on step 3, right? With Primož there, and maybe Dani Martinez is so. He's manifested his discontent, I would say, and there are interested parties. I don't know if it's still possible. He has a contract for next year. That's what the manager of Bora said. And for the moment, he said, we assume that he's going to stay. I mean, if you're a manager, if you're a team manager and you are sure, you say, hey, he's not going anywhere. He has a contract for next year. He's staying here. After his contract finishes, he can do what he wants. So I don't know what to really make of that interview of Ralph Denk, the Bora manager. There are negotiations going on, and I've heard that Ineos is in prime position for Kjan Uiterbroeks. So, if that's still to happen, it's possible. I mean, I don't know. I mean, nowadays, there's been a time where when a rider had a contract, you couldn't go anywhere. And the last few years, we're starting to go more and more towards a buying and selling industry, like European soccer, right? Like when players are traded to other teams, and the same is starting to happen with cyclists. I'm not necessarily against that, because I think it's good for the sport. It's good for the sport, and especially good for the cyclists, because it increases the salaries.
Yeah, and if he doesn't want to be there, he shouldn't have to stay there. And that's probably not good for the team to have them there if he doesn't want to be there. it's a little weird to me. It's like, man, if I had $1 million for every time Ineos was linked to a young rider this year, I'd have $3 million. But it's like, that makes me like not trust it. But it's also a bit strange, I guess, on both parties, because for Ineos, do you need another like yet to be developed GC rider? You kind of need a winner. Like they already have Carlos Rodriguez. They've run through endless amounts of guys who should have been good GC riders. Like they just, Luke Plapp just left the team.
Okay, but there's who's available. There's nobody. I mean, if you look, you have Jonas, you have Tadej, you have Primož, and who else? Right?
Tao Geoghegan Hart should have been the one that they
and
signed.
Remco. So if those four are not, I mean, they've tried Remco, they've tried hard.
Yeah.
So yeah. I mean, I would go for Jan Uijtdebroeks. I would go for him.
But then, so if you're him, do you look at Ineos and say, I trust this team to develop me? They don't have a GM.
Yeah.
Who gets better at that team, I guess would be my question.
I mean, they do have some good riders. I mean, let's not. I mean, Carlos Rodriguez.
Well, they have good riders, but
there.
Who's that?
Carlos Rodriguez has developed in that team.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
Tom Pidcock didn't get any worse.
Well, would you say he did? I don't know. I mean, I think I don't know. If I stacked his seasons up, I think you could argue that he's gotten worse on the road every season he's been with them. But there's other things going on there.
Yeah, well, I think you know, and especially now that Ineos needs somebody, I think for Jan Uijtdebroeks, it would probably be a good environment. It all depends what's happening also internally, you know, with Ellingworth gone, who's going to come in, what's going to happen. I've heard rumors that Brailsford was going to be more involved again. Then I've heard that that's not the case, that he's actually going to be more detached because he's more and more involved in the other sports project of what's his name, Jim Ratcliffe.
Yeah,
football, soccer. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what's happening there. It's, you know, it must be weird, strange internally, I think, because if you see the reaction of Geraint Thomas on the leaving of Ellingworth, he was shocked and, you know, disgusted, he said. So I don't think anybody saw that coming.
No, I thought that was weird. It's just oddly handled on all parts. I guess I heard a theory that they'll maybe bring in like a non-cycling person to run the team. I don't know if I love that. Like you hear stories about Brailsford running Manchester United, which that kind of makes me worry too, because that's going to take a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of energy. What are they going to do with the cycling team? If I was Uijtdebroeks, I'd say I'm on a pretty good team and I trust myself to be better than Alexander Vlasov. Like if you cannot prove yourself to be better than him definitively, then you have other problems. And Primož is 34 years old. I mean, he's not going to be around forever. So I would probably stay put if I was him.
I think it all comes down to the money.
That's true. And if they just paid, we were just talking about how much they paid for Primož,
I mean,
so they might not have.
Let's not forget, Uijtdebroeks signed there at a very young age. He was in their development team actually as an under 23. I mean, as a 18, 19-year-old rider. So you know, he signed for a good contract, but not a huge contract. Probably signed a 3-year deal initially. So I think that's obviously something that also come into the game, because he's now going to want more money, and this Bora still has the means to increase that contract, that it's interesting enough for Uijtdebroeks to stay.
That's a good point. And if someone's going to pay you more money and you can move to Monaco and not pay tax on it, do that. That's my advice. Don't listen to me about jibber jabber about the team strength, but. You said something I just want to touch on before we go. I was thinking, Jumbo-Visma, bad offseason. They lost Primož Roglic. That's not good. You said they're maybe stronger for 2024 because of who they've added. Yeah,
well, I mean, they lose Roglic, but you know, if the focus is the Tour, they have to make a choice. So I think the choice of betting everything on Jonas for the Tour, and on Van Aert for the classics, and let's not forget Sepp Kuss won the Vuelta. So if you have to let one go, I would let him go also. He was expensive, and he's at the end of his career. So I think with the addition, for example, of Matteo Jorgensen, who I expect great things from at Jumbo-Visma, and another big talent, Ben Tulet, coming from Ineos. Those two, I think, add a lot of value in the depth of the team. Yes, Primož is gone, and they're gonna miss Primož. Primož, wins the Vuelta, wins the Giro, wins Tirreno Adriatico, Catalunya. They're gonna miss that. But in depth, I think that they got stronger. If you look at the support riders they lost and what they've added, plus the talent that's coming from the development team, let's not forget, we're going to talk about that in another podcast. They have some really, really strong riders coming up.
Yeah, I was just looking at their development riders coming up. These guys look pretty good.
Yeah, really good. Really good. So I think in depth, they did a really good job in the off-season, Jumbo.
And before we go, concerning Visma, is Wout going to win the Giro? Is Wout going to race the Giro? What's going on with this?
He's going to race the Giro. I'm surprised to see that or to hear that also. But I don't really know what. 1 or 2 years ago, he said he was not interested at all in going for GCs in Grand Tours. Let's not forget, the Giro is a special race. Yeah, there's 2 time trials. I think. Yeah, there's longer
2 time trials. They're pretty long.
But above all, the Giro is the only Grand Tour that has really deep pockets for stars.
Yeah. This was my theory too.
And that's the reason why Van Aert goes to the Giro. We were all surprised to see Mathieu van der Poel race the Giro last year, right?
Yeah.
Why do you think he went?
Well, you famously sent a pretty good rider to the Giro yourself.
They asked us to come with that rider, and they were very, very, very flexible. So, so many years later, it's still the case, and I think that's the main reason why Wout van Aert goes to the Giro. Now, if he goes, he will, of course, try to win stages. It also depends on the competition. If he can get a good result or not, and maybe he wants to use it as a test to say, okay. Although I don't think it's, I personally don't think it's the best way for him to go for a GC, because he will focus on the classics and the Giro straight after the classics. So there is almost no time to specifically prepare for the Giro in his case. So I think we're going to see Wout van Aert in the same capacity we saw Mathieu van der Poel last year in the Giro d'Italia.
Yeah, well, that would be fun. And when the pockets are emptied, do they go, when the deep pockets open up, do they go to the team or the rider? How does that work?
Partly. The biggest part goes to the rider. Okay. But the team for sure will get compensated also to send Wout van Aert to the Giro. Now, Spencer, speaking of the classics, I would like to take the opportunity to remind everybody, all our listeners and viewers, to check out our travel section on the We Do Team webpage. You've all seen us 3 years in a row in Mallorca. We are doing next year the same thing for the classics. We invite 15 people, limited to 15 people, 15 guests for Strade Bianche, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Tour of Flanders, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Paris-Roubaix, Friday, Saturday, Sunday for the VIP experience. I highly recommend this experience. We have George and I leading the group, but for these races, we also have a special guest For Strade Bianche, it's in Italy, in Tuscany. We have ex-world champion, ex-Giro winner, Gianni Bugno as our guest, who will stay with us for 3 days. And for Tour of Flanders and Paris-Roubaix, we have 3-time winner and also ex-world champion Johan Museo as our special guest. So I invite everybody to check out the travel section on wedo.team and check it out.
Yeah, it sounds awesome. Yeah, wedo.team, go to the travel tab, and it's like a can't miss experience. I would highly recommend it. Mm-hmm. Well, thanks, Johan. This Move Plus is in danger of turning into a move, so we better take off. But we'll be back next week to kind of go into some of the implications of these moves in a little bit more depth. Do you have anything else to add before we go?
Nope, that's it for me. Next week we will go more in detail about stuff.
All right. Well, thanks so much, and we will talk to everyone soon.